of our workshop. Today's speaker is Riti Roy. Riti is a researcher in the field of computational and systems biology, currently serving as a research scholar at the University of Kalyani, Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Nadia, West Bengal. She has an outstanding academic background, holding a BTech in the biotechnology from the National Institute of Technology, Durgapur, and an MTech in computational and systems biology from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, where she secured the top rank in her third semester. She has gained diverse research experience across prestigious institutions in India and abroad, including the National Institute of Plant Genome Research, New Delhi, and the Harry Perkins Institute of Medical Research at the University of Western Australia. Her research integrates machine learning and artificial intelligence with biological sciences, focusing on cancer genomics, proteomics, and bioinformatics. She has a particular interest in precision medicine and cell to cell communication. Riti has an impressive publication record with multiple papers in the reputed international journals such as Molecular Cancer Therapeutics, Scientific Reports, BMC, Genomics, and PLOS 1. Her work has received over 745 citations with an H index of 11, reflecting both impact and consistency in research output. Her international engagement includes oral and poster presentations at leading global conferences, including the International Mammalian Genome Conference in Japan and the Learn Genome Conference in Australia. Her contributions have been recognized through several honors, notably the Best Poster Award at the Science on the Swan conference in Perth. She has received travel awards from the International Mammalian Genome Society and to present at the EMBL Australia Symposium at Adelaide. She was member of Australian Bioinformatics and Computational Biology Society, and also a member of Phantom 5 Consortium, an international research initiative led by Raiken in Yokohama, Japan, focused on the functional annotation of mammalian genomes and the characterization of transcriptional regulatory networks. So I request Riti to start the exciting talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Uh, Firstly, it is a great honor to be able to present in this data camp, solving real world problems with AI and Python. I think it's a very contemporary and very relevant topic, and I would like to extend my appreciation to Jagabandhu College, especially to Principal Sir, Dr. Shubhrata Kumar Roy, and the convener of this event, Dr. Kishore Mukhopadhyay, for letting me be a part of this data camp and giving me the opportunity to speak. Um, I think the set, I mean the previous sessions have already laid the foundation for this data camp. We have already gained knowledge, the basic knowledge which was required for this data camp. Moving forward from the knowledge that we have already gathered, I would like to take forward to my presentation today. So previously, I think Dr. Kishore Mukhopadhyay had led the foundation of AI. So you all, those who are present in the data camp, we are all aware of the basic of the AI. And previously, two sessions led the foundation of basic data handling, data visualization. So today, I would like to speak on a part of or a subset of AI, that is machine learning. I think these terms are not now very it's not very familiar, or I would say not very disfamiliar also. uh, we are quite aware of these terms, or aware or unknowingly we have all been part of this process, I would say. So without further, let me start with the presentation. Is the screen visible?
Yes, white screen visible.
White screen. Okay, the slide is not visible. Stop sharing. I guess now it's
Yes,
visible.
yes.
Okay.
You can make it. You can make it full screen.
Yes. All right. So the topic on which I will be speaking today is decoding data, that is, applying supervised and unsupervised machine learning algorithms to the real world problems. So I think we are all quite aware of what is machine learning. Sir previously had laid a foundation of what machine learning is. So, if we broadly speak about what machine learning is, we would say that it's a subset of the artificial intelligence. If we broadly consider artificial intelligence, it's a subset of the artificial intelligence that actually enables the system to learn, and we are able to improve from there without being exclusively, we are not programming it. So whatever the computer is learning, it's learning from the data, and it uses it to learn from the data itself. So characteristics, I would say, obviously here data is the king. So it is highly data driven, heavily depends on the large amount of data that is required for training this data set. Next, obviously, adaptability. The more data we have, the more improvement it will be. So over the time, the more data we will have, the improvement of our model will be. Next, if we talk about the predictability, so predictions or any sort of decisions that we are making, that is being exclusively, or it is being programmed to perform the task, or we are depending on the data, we are accessing the data and using that data to learn from the data itself. So if we say traditionally what used to be done before, when we before the advent of artificial intelligence or AI, traditionally programming, we what we used to do, we used to exclusively create a write a block of text, that is we used to write the code that used to give a logic to the program, and that manually or to the programmer we used to code that, and without and with that we used to get the our desired output. So traditionally that used to be done, but now if we see, with the advent of this machine learning, what is being done here, we are feeding the data, and then we are using the algorithm to automatically, what we are doing, we are learning from the data itself. So we are learning the patterns, we are making the decisions, we are making the predictions based on the data itself. And then if the programmer, they want to deny the model, or we continue the learning process, but the rules or the logic are manually and not manually coded. So previously what we used to do, that is different in case of machine learning. So input plus program used to give us the output, but here if we see in machine learning, what is happening is our input and our expected output, that is setting out the rules for the decision making, that is allowing the machine learning to learn from the system. So traditionally programming, that as I mentioned, so data plus the program, the computer, we would fit with our block of text or the code, and then we used to get the output. But here in machine learning, what we are doing is from the data itself, we are getting, we are learning, and from there we are getting the, we are training the model. Okay. So in traditional programming system, what the programmer used to do, they obviously we used to define the set of rules, or the based on the known factors, whatever the things were known to us, so that would contribute maybe for the customer churn, like when was the last time that that customer made the purchase, or the number of customer service interaction that we had. So that was very limited, so that applies to only the hard coded rules, that the customer uh, had made this sort of purchase in the last time, maybe this was the number of services, this was the number of interactions we had, and based on that we had to hard coded rules we had to predict. So this sort of system, what's the main problem is that it's very static, I mean, and also very limited. I mean, whatever predefined rules or whatever predefined knowledge we have. From there we have to capture the full complexity of the behavior of the customer. But with the advent of this data and machine learning, what we are able to do, we are able to leverage from this huge historical data set, we are able to train the model. So automatically we have more, we can learn more from there. We can learn the patterns, we can learn the relationships between the customer behavior, then from there the outcomes. So continuously more data is being added, and that is giving us more flexibility, greater flexibility and accuracy for our prediction. Okay, so it is more effective in predicting the behavior of the customer compared to the previously the that is rule based approach that used to be that used to follow. So I think this is a very common example or a common situation which we all have been through. Whenever I think all of us have been to the online shopping sites, I think so. Yes, for everyone, sometime or the other, we have all been there. We have been checking out some product, and from there, obviously, we are getting, this product looks look similar to the other one. We are continuously getting the recommendations. So maybe people have bought this thing together, the other, maybe if you're not getting the size, there is some other options which are also available, so they are recommending something or the other. So these are all these are all obviously the examples of the machine learning. Yeah, same thing if we see when you are watching your favorite show or favorite movies, we are watching in the online platforms, Netflix and Hotstar, other. So we continuously get the recommendations. Maybe the next movie which you want to watch. So these are all examples of machine learning. These are all from the based on the previous data that we are browsing history that has provided. Based on this, the recommendations are being provided, and most of the time those are pretty accurate and also very tempting for us. Very hard to resist the temptation of watching, and also for the purchasing purpose. So I think mainly what we want to see is the vast area. I think anything which we talk about or anything which we look around nowadays, everywhere there is machine learning that is needed, or machine learning that has been applied to all the examples. So machine learning excels almost in every task, so it's very difficult or impractical to explicitly say. uh, I think we have an audience which is quite diverse, and most of the people, they have something or the other uh, area in which machine learning is being applied or is already been applied. Uh, so first, very used um, area, common area is image recognition. So identifying, your objects, faces, scenes, images, facial recognition. Nowadays you will see all the mobiles and all the other apps, everything has facial recognitions. So uh, be it the security lock in your houses or office, or in your phones, um, then the the social networking sites, they are easily able to identify the individuals from the image. The tagging function that is being used, most of the time, these are all implementations of machine learning. Sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they are not very accurate. I don't know, some of you might know that I have an identical twin, so many a times they get confused and they tag the other twin. So accuracy, it depends, but yeah, so sometimes the accuracy might not be, we need to improve the model. Another is natural language processing. I think I'm audible to everyone. Is it fine, sir?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you. So we have the virtual assistants, Siri, Alexa. They are able to understand our voice command. So that is another very area in which the natural language processing is being used. We are able to understand the and generate the human language, that is possible. Another very important area in which it is predictive analytics. Obviously, we are forecasting uh, heavily now, the stock market predictions or the weather forecasting, that has heavily been taken over by AI. So these are the areas in which machine learning has been applied very extensively. Recommendation systems I have spoken about, obviously based on our previous history, preference, we are constantly being referred or recommended our favorite shows or the task, movies or the products, online sites. We are being always spammed with so many of the recommendations. Then self-driving cars, navigating and making the decisions in real time without the human interaction. Self-driving car, obviously, that is autonomous vehicles, big um, application of the machine learning. Little bit, if we go, I think history was mainly spoken about. I would like to just highlight few things, that is, historically machine learning that has evolved significantly. It has evolved over the decades, but early, if we see 1950s and 60s, that was perceptron, that is the single neural network model that was usually conceptualized. Then our decision tree, then K neighbors, the back propagation neural networks, all this came into picture. But the main paradigm shift that happened, that is the rise of the internet and the explosion of data. So main, I think the shift that happened was in the 2090s and the 2010, big data, arrival of the big data, cloud computing. Then obviously, effective the GPUs, the specialized hardwares that happened. So that led mainly to this paradigm massive shift, our data heavy, that led. So key development obviously is availability of the large data sets, because if we see, we have already, I mean, most of the statistical analysis was there previously also. We used to work and we used to obviously predict, but what was a need for this sort of analysis? Obviously, it is because of the big data, the large data sets that are now being available. So we have to obviously come up with more effective, uh, complex model of handling these data sets. Uh, so development of more and more sophisticated algorithms in order to cater to the huge amount of data sets that are being generated. So the main paradigm shift that happened, I would say, was mainly because of the rise of the internet and the explosion of the huge amount of data that happened. So this was previously discussed, but I think it should be little bit explained in order to set the tone for this discussion. Is understanding the relationship between uh, I assume everyone is not aware of these terms. So I have made the presentation in a way that is very simple and lucid, which will be, I think, which can cater to multidiscipline audience. So talking broadly about I would say it's the broader field that is mainly dedicated to, to stimulate the human cognitive behavior. That is, we are able to learn, we are able to reason, or we are able to solve the problem. So that is the broad area of artificial intelligence. That is creating the machines to which can perform tasks typically requiring the human intelligence. But if we see machine learning, I would suggest it's the uh, subset. It is the subset of artificial intelligence, which is mainly to develop algorithms that allow the computers to learn. So learn from the data and make predictions or decisions based on the data. So this is mainly data driven, database. So instead of being exclusively programmed to perform a task, ML, what it does, it's improve the performance by identifying, we are able to identify the different patterns that is making the data driven predictions. So you will see example, if we talk about so decision making ability of humans, that is speech recognition, then chess playing programs, these are all broader applications of AI. But particularly if we talk about machine learning, we would say, we all use emails. So we have the system of classifying the emails as spam or not spam. So that is a very classical example of machine learning. So system analysts, they passed the emails and they classify those emails into. We have more classification now, but those yeah, traditionally spams, not spams, we are able to classify it into new incoming mails. We are able to classify those. And talking about more subset, I would say subset of machine learning is deep learning. So deep learning mainly is specialized, that is model the and understand the complex patterns of large data set. So deep learning obviously depends or requires a huge or a large amount of data set to actually allow the neural networks in many layers to model the. So it's the scenario where traditional machine learning may struggle uh, due to the complexity and the volume of data, but that is expressively done to uh, model and understand huge data set or large data set. That is the deep learning. So artificial intelligence, if we say, is the broader, but here now, I mean, this field is so dynamic and it's evolving almost every day, that we are not only restricted to deep learning, we have much more than this, agentic AI, generative AI. So all this will come under deep learning. So broadly, I mean, we will have talk in the later part of the sessions. Sir will cover. So broadly, artificial intelligence, I would say, is to make sense, reason, act, and to adapt. Machine learning, it's performs or it tries to improve that. more exposed. So we are exposed to more and more data over time, and from there we are able to, the machine is trying to improve. And deep learning is mainly to tackle or to learn from the using the multi-layered neural networks to learn from the vast amount of data where the machine learning might be restricted. So this is more or less the broad understanding of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. So so if we talk about uh, machine learning, the advent of machine learning, um, obviously 1980s, that with the advent of the neural networks, but mainly it came into picture with the ability of more computational power and the large data sets that had so machine learning that's focused mainly on creating models. We are able to identify the patterns and make predictions from there. So performance, obviously it will improve by learning more from the examples, and obviously we have to adjust our parameters accordingly. So focus is always to develop the algorithm that can generalize from the data, and we are able to make predictions or decisions that represents a significant move from the earlier approaches that was done for AI. Deep learning, obviously, remarkable success, imaging, speech recognition, where the traditional machine learning algorithms were struggling. There, the deep learning has been extensively now being used. So, mainly it's on the hierarchical learning. So, multi-layer neural networks that are usually followed. So, progressions have been from AI to ML and now to deep learning. So, if we now talk about the types of machine learning, so machine learning, it can be categorized mainly to two types. So we have uh, supervised learning and we have unsupervised learning mainly. But we also have the reinforcement learning and also the semi supervised. So supervised learning, from the name itself, we can, if we are able to understand that this type of machine learning, here what will happen, here the model is trained on a labeled data set. Now what do we mean by labeled data set? So means that the training data, it includes both the input data and the corresponding correct output data. That means the labels are attached. So one of the main goal of the supervised learning is to learn, or we want to map from the inputs the output so that we can accurately predict the output of any new or a unseen data. So during the training, what happens, the model is being, they are able to make predictions on the training data, and the predictions are then compared to the actual levels. So uh, difference between the predict,
Viti, I want to make a comment.
yes.
Defining the level data, can I use the childhood things? I mean, A for apple, B for ball, C for cat, D for dog. That is leveling with A with apple, B with ball, and so on.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes. So labeling obviously is done in various ways. So it can be, if it is a image, we label it. If the information of the image is already available, then we are able to label that. Um, if it is some sort of say medical data, we have genes, proteins. So if those sort of genes or proteins are already known to us, it is already annotated, then we are able to assign, or uh, label those genes. So labeling is done in this way. So common applications obviously is where the model predicts the category level. So uh, I've spoken previously spam detection. So if any term that is present which signifies that this mail can be a spam, it is a fraud, fraudulent. So it is categorized as the spam email. So obviously we are able to predict house prices. We will talk about it in later. So supervised here I have mentioned. So what sir was saying, the labeled. So here if you see the input raw data, so we have, so what is visible here is that we have a mixture of uh, a lot of animals. So there are the elephant, there is cow, there is mammal. So if we train this in the training data set uh, with our sort of whatever algorithm we are using, and then we are able to process. So any new data that comes, then we have to check whether it is it a cow, or is it an elephant, or is it a mammal, and then based on that we are able to predict whether it's a elephant, or whether it's a mammal, or whether it's a cow. So it's a sort of supervised, means a teacher is there, they are taking the supervision, and under the supervision we are able to categorize it into the different types. So this is basically the supervised learning, the broader supervised learning. So there are various, I think this part is clear, which was also previously a little bit mentioned also. Okay. So now there are, if we see the supervised learning, mainly can be classified into two types of algorithms. So mainly we have the regression and we have the classification. So regression obviously is mainly used for continuous value. So when we are trying to predict the maybe the house price, or the stock price, or the temperature, so we are usually using the regression. So mainly the common regression algorithms that are used, we have linear regression, polynomial, then we have the lasso regression, the ridge regression. So linear regression, linear regression is mainly when, I think we have, so when we are trying to see a linear regression between the our sorry, sorry, yes. So when we are trying to see the linear relationships between our dependent variable and the independent variable. So independent variable is usually our input, maybe based on how many hours you have studied, is a factor we want to see. So based on that our dependent variable, that is the outcome. So how many hours you have studied, based on that what can be the exam score, because it depends obviously. We are, because based on the hours of study we are able to predict the our exam score. So it will depend on how many hours we have studied. So it's sort of the linear relationship that we are trying to see. Polynomial regression, obviously, if uh, yeah, sometimes the linear relationship don't exist, then we have to for non-linear data and linear relationship between the dependent and the independent variables. So for that we have to look into the polynomial. Now uh, if we look into the lasso regression, lasso is usually the linear regression with the L1 regularization. That means usually it improves the model generalization. So there is usually a penalty term. I have not gone into very much details of all the models, but I, the main criteria I think should be highlighted so that uh, obviously everyone knows when to use what. So um, so lasso is usually when we want to improve the model's generalization, so we usually add the penalty terms. So what it does, it controls the overfitting. So it will automatically, it will the feature selection, obviously it shrinks some of the coefficient to exactly zero. So usually the model is much more better. So it uses the L1 regularization. So um, uh, obviously we are able to use lasso when there is sparse models. So and automatically it performs the feature selection. Very useful, obviously, in case of the high dimensional data set. And regression, if we talk about, reach is useful. Reach is basically our L2, that is L2 regularization. So next, if we look into the classification, so mainly when we have to predict the categorical values, uh, that means if a customer like will buy a product or not, or whether a email is spam or not, so whether a medical image is tumor not, uh, yes, it are not continuous. So some can be, when we are able to predict or when we want to predict the categorical values, then usually the classification is used. So we have logistic regression, we have SVM, we have the decision tree, the random forest. So all this can be explained in details, but let me see how the time goes. Okay. So if we talk about the what is the main advantage of this supervised learning, so obviously it will learn from the labeled examples. So if we learn from labeled example, obviously our accuracy or the our prediction accuracy will be higher. It will make more accurate predictions on the new and unseen data. And with more data and training, obviously the model will increase the accuracy and we will obviously receive the better performance and more reliable. uh, it will work very well for many tasks like, yeah, spam detection, predicting the house pricing. Then it can also will be able to handle both the classification. So both classification and regression both can be handled, and it makes it more flexible for the problem solving. Disadvantage obviously is very prominent, is that every time we will need a very well labeled data set in order to get the corresponding output. So creating such huge data set obviously is very time consuming and a more tedious job. So, and also there are chances, sometimes there are chances of making mistakes. So it works well on many tasks, like but with very complex or unstructured problems, obviously it's difficult to understand the patterns. Models also, sometimes there are overfitting problem, so it can overfit the training data, which means it will perform well on the training data, but with the test data it will not show our desired output. So these models also often need constant updating. So with more new label data sets, obviously, if we have more variety. So I was showing you the previous example, the examples of cow and camel. But obviously, we all know there are a lot of varieties of cows. There are a lot of varieties of camel. So more and more variety, if it is added, so our labeling will become more robust, and because we will get, yeah, so there will be less chances that the cow may be labeled as uh, less chances that it will be labeled as a mammal, camel, or a dog and a wolf. It will be able to categorize it more in a more better way. Now coming to unsupervised learning. So unsupervised learning, if we say, um, so from the name itself, we can understand. That means this is a type of machine learning where the model is trained on the data that is not labeled. So where our labeling is not available, we try to predict from the data itself. So in other words, the training data set consists only of input data without any sort of, or without any the output levels that are available. So then what is our primary goal? So the goal of this unsupervised learning is to, then from the data itself, so from the data itself we want to model and we want to identify the patterns, or what is sort of relationships, or what structure is present within the data, that we will be able to understand. So without the guidance of what the correct output will be, based on the data itself, we are able to identify. So since there are no labels to guide this, so we are learning process. So it is a unsupervised learning algorithms. Very common sort of unsupervised algorithm is clustering. We all have been using this in some way or the other. We have all been part of it. The various sort of the customer segmentation in marketing. So you will see whatever your buying pattern is, you will be recommended articles or uh, products based on that. So that is also a way of unsupervised also, supervised also segmentation. uh, Mainly, broadly they collect all the data, and from there they are trying to cluster out the based on our preferences. They're trying to cluster us into various segments, and based on those segments they are trying to recommend us, or the sort of segmentation maybe for um, you know when we are buying a house, or any sort of marketing companies when they are trying to market, they also are being using this sort of uh, clustering algorithm to segment the customers. Um, Unsupervised learning also is particularly useful when we are trying to explore the underlying structure of the data. So always we are not able to know the structure of the data. So some, if some hidden patterns is there, more insight into how the hidden patterns are, how the structure are. So that is quite a exploratory data analysis, EDA. So in those sort of scenarios where the label data is quite sparse, and sometimes when it is not available, it's a very area, or the algorithms are being used. So that's the area of the unsupervised learning. So unsupervised learning here, if we see that we have the input raw data, so unknown output, no training data set. Here the algorithm, the model will train, then it will process, and from there we will be able to identify. So here also we have elephant, camel, cows, but there is no label that is attached. So here it has not been specified that the elephant looks like this, so the animal looks like this, so it is an elephant. It is not mentioned. So we have a mixture of raw data, and from there the machine is trying to model and find out the output based on the features. So if there is a, suppose from the figure we are able to identify, so if it has uh, the long teeth is there, then the trunk of the animal is present. From this feature it is able to categorize it as a elephant. Maybe for camel we have the hump, long neck. From there it is able to categorize it into a different subtype of animal. So that is the camel. Then cow. So based on those features it is able to identify that it is a cow. So from the data itself, without knowing what it is able to cluster out, and from there we are able to get the output. So this is the unsupervised learning. So advantages of unsupervised learning is, obviously it's a big advantage. We don't need the label data, and this is the mainly the area where we all are working towards, because most of the time we don't know what sort of data or what the labels are. So from there we want to explore. So exploratory data analysis is possible only in this case. So this is a big advantage. So we can start working on large data sets very easily, very quickly. So this is able to handle the large amount of data. Obviously it reduces to simpler forms without losing the important patterns. Now from here we are able to obviously discover also new patterns. We are able to discover the relationships in the data that was previously not known to us, so which will offer a much more valuable insight. And by analyzing obviously this sort of unlabeled data, it will show us new trends, it will show us new groupings, so that heavily helps us to understand our data more deeply. So this sort of application, I think it is across all discipline. Maybe it is a field of zoology which we are trying to understand. So I'm not very familiar, but just my assumptions that when we do the spotting of the animals, so from there itself also we can train the model, and some unknown or new species can be found out, which can be similar to a distinct which share which might share a sort of structure, similarity structure. So it also implies to uh, maybe the field of geography, or medicinal plants, herbs, everywhere, customer behavior, where new patterns or new behavioral patterns or new sort of species, those can be found out by analyzing this sort of large data sets. So it has applications in, I think, all the discipline, across all the disciplines, and easily we can implement this code uh, in all sort of data sets. Obviously, one of the disadvantage is that without this sort of proper labeling, accuracy is a problem. It might be little difficult to tell how accurate or effective the model is, and we have to constantly work towards that. And there is also a clear guidance. There is lack of this clear guidance that can lead to less precise result. And also after the grouping, obviously we will need to check the labels of the groupings, and that is also a time consuming process. Then we have to deal with missing data, then we have to deal with outliers, we have to deal with the noise. So that also makes it's easily affect the quality of the result. But these are the things which we have to keep in mind. We all have to work towards when we are handling the real life data sets. So, type of the unsupervised learning, I would say it's mainly, firstly, we use the clustering method. Uh, so, clustering is used mainly when we are trying to group the similar points. Uh, so, it works very well when we repeatedly move the data points closer to the center. So, we are able to cluster it into the different groups. So, very popular among the clustering algorithm is the k-means clustering. Then we have hierarchical clustering, PCA, independent component analysis, Gaussian, and DB-scan, density-based spatial. So, I would discuss little bit on the k-means clustering. Hierarchical clustering also. Hierarchical clustering has got those who mainly work in the biological fields. They might be very much aware of the hierarchical clustering. We use it extensively, to classify our genes, disease genes versus conditions where the group of genes might be highly expressed. So previously we used to have microarray data, then next generation sequencing data. So a very common way of representing those sort of expression data set, it was through hierarchical clustering. So that's a very area heavily used in biological sciences. Um, K-means clustering is also very popular. Uh, Commonly used to find the natural groupings among the unlabeled data set. Um, DB-scan is obviously it's based on the density, and PCA is mainly when we want to reduce. So it is the dimensionality reduction technique. Principal component analysis, that is mainly for the dimensional reduction. So obviously it helps us to reduce the number of features in a data set, but we keep the most important features, or the important information is still kept, but it's the dimensional reduction process. that is used. Singular value decomposition, that is mainly for the linear, yeah, factorization method. It usually decomposes a matrix into the three other matrices. So a new way to represent the data to its singular forms. Gaussian mixture models. So it depends on, most of this will depend on our type of data and what we are trying to see from there. So based on that, mainly these things, or what method we are trying to implement will work on it. So if we see the difference between the supervised versus unsupervised learning, obviously the primary difference would lie that we are learning from examples where the correct answer is already known. So that is supervised learning for us. And for unsupervised, obviously, it's a more exploratory process. So we try to find the hidden patterns where no correct answer is, or the correct answer label is still not provided. um, so here the inputs are the features and the labels, but for unsupervised, obviously it's the features only. Output will be the class or a numerical value here. Here we will get a more group or the dimension or anomalies. So mainly it is used for, there are much more difference to that. Typically, uh, if we see that supervised versus unsupervised, first and foremost, obviously, that it is trained on labeled data set, and this is trained on the unlabeled data set. Obviously, if we talk about the complexity, it's much more simpler method. Computationally, it is more complex to uh, compute the unsupervised machine learning algorithm. Accuracy also is quite high in case of supervised. Number of classes is obviously known. Here it is unknown. Data analysis also, uh, real time analysis of the data. Linear logistic algorithms I have already discussed, which are the ones that are mainly used. Output, we have the desired output that is already given to us. Training data set, from there we are able to infer the model, but obviously for unsupervised there will be no training data set. Model, we can, supervised machine learning, we were able to test our model, but obviously here we won't be able to test the model. So supervision, obviously it will need the supervision to train. Here it is not necessary. We are able to classify and associate. Here we are able to classify and classification and regression, both are possible. So this is more or less uh, the sort of difference between supervised and unsupervised machine learning. So for us, I would say, obviously supervised machine learning will be much more time consuming. Here it will be less time consuming for the unsupervised. So this is more or less the sort of difference between the supervised versus unsupervised machine learning. So now if we talk about the semi-supervised learning, so semi-supervised learning is mainly, uh, it will fall between the supervised and unsupervised. So mainly for image data, sometimes we have to model on a data set that usually small amount of label is present, but mainly we have a large amount of unlabeled data that is present. So label portion of the data will provide the model with some sort of example for that will be helpful for us to uh, work on and to learn the more general mapping. So unlevel portion will help us to uh, obviously the and more underlying structure that is present, or how the distribution of the data will be, that will be mainly useful for us. So as I was mentioning that examples of this semi supervised learning mainly very much used for image classification. So some images are correctly tagged, but obviously tagging or labeling, that is very expensive and also time consuming. So when we have a large sort of unlabeled images and we have few labeled images, semi supervised learning sort of model is being used here, where we can combine both the labeled and unlabeled images. Reinforcement learning is type of the machine learning where it's makes a decision by interacting with the environment. That is they so there, for every action there is a reward or a punishment. So after taking any action, the agent receives a reward from the environment, which indicates that there is a benefit to it. And if it is if there is a uh, um, so there is a punishment for every penalty that is. So value function here will be very crucial. So estimating how the particular state or the action is. So based on the what we are trying to expect from the future rewards. So that's reinforcement learning. Um, I just wanted to mention little bit about batch learning and online learning. So batch learning is when we are trying to train the model on the entire data set at once. So in this approach, what happens? The model processes the complete data set to learn from it and then make predictions or the decision based on the learned information. So it will actually involve several iterations. So it will iterate it over the entire data set and it will try to optimize the model's parameters. So once the model or the training is completed, then the model is evaluated and tested on the separate subset of data sets. Online learning, if we see, on the other hand, this will involve training a model that is incremental. So as the new data arrives, it will be implemented. So this approach happens when we are continuously, updating it in small batch or data. So that's the difference between the primary difference between the batch learning and the online learning. Then we have instance based, where the model makes decision based on the individual training examples, and then we have model based learning. So general construction of the model from the training data. Bias variance trade-off, we will be aware. So error that is introduced for approximately the any sort of modeling when we are doing, we obviously have to deal with um, the the error terms. So we have to introduce the error to approximate the real world problem. So high bias occurs when when the our model, that means our model is too simple, so it is unable to capture the underlying pattern. So if the model is too rigid, then also it won't be able to adapt to the nuisance. So there has to be a trade-off between the bias and the variance. And variance, obviously, it refers to the model sensitivity to the fluctuations. So high variance will occur when the when the model is too complex. So it is and it captures the noise and random fluctuations. So that will result to overfitting. So when the model performs well in the training set, but it doesn't perform well in our unseen or the test data set, then obviously it is failing to generalize beyond the specific examples. So this has to be taken into consideration when we are modeling. So there has to be a bias versus variance trade-off. So bias decreases, models become more flexible. Variance increases, obviously the model starts to fit in more noise in the training set. So high bias, and when we are working on a simple model, then it's usually the high bias and the low variance. Gradually we increase the complexity while we will monitor the our model. Okay, so if we look into our machine learning development cycle, yeah, we will understand how we actually do the modeling, or how we actually develop this sort of machine learning algorithms. So obviously, first and foremost, we have to define the problem. Understanding the problem and identifying what has to be done is the main first objective. So if we want to predict, uh, a customer leaving the service, or anticipate whether a customer is at a risk of leaving the service, so that is our primary target. That holds for everything. Most of any problem is first identifying the problem, then obviously we have to collect the data, is to gather and process the relevant data that is needed. So I think I've made the talk more general. So maybe for some people it might be very general, but keeping in mind the diverse, I think, background. Yeah. So next step is obviously our data collection. So we have to collect the data, then we have to process the relevant data that is needed. So that can be, we have to clean the data. Maybe there are missing data, then we have to handle those sort of missing data before the analysis. See which are the relevant data sets that are present. So we have to understand the factors that influence it, and then work on that. Next, obviously, is to choose the correct model. So selecting the appropriate models also involves choosing the machine learning algorithm that aligns with our problem. So obviously, if it is a uh, linear whether it's a linear regression problem, or if there is excuse me, whether it's a logistic regression problem. So if it involves binary classification, then it is a logistic regression, then it is suitable for predicting the binary outcome. So accordingly, what type of data we have to select our model, whether it's a label data, whether it's unlabeled data. Then if it is an unlabeled data, what type of data is present? According to that, the model has to be chosen. So next we have to train the model. Obviously, training the model, it will involve the training data to teach the model. Um, then we'll evaluate the model's performance. So there are a lot of matrices. So if you want to see the accuracy, precision required, then a lot of hyperparameters that is required. So those has to be tuned. I mean, we have to look into the tuning, so that we have to prevent both overfitting and underfitting. Uh, then deploying the model, that means we have to integrate it into the real world environment and see whether the predictions that are being made or the decisions that are being made, whether they are correct or not. Then we have to monitor and maintain, so that it remains accurate and relevant over the time. So this is more or less the step that is involved in the machine learning developmental cycle. Uh, Applications I was previously talking about, um, a diverse range of applications are present. Maybe I will talk a little bit more little later. How am I going with time? Okay. Obviously, it has, we have healthcare, we have applications across finance, law, governance, education, retail, marketing, manufacturing, public policy, cybersecurity. Most of the areas, they have a lot of applications and implementations uh, of these algorithms. Mainly, if we talk about healthcare, a lot of work are done for the disease prediction. Then uh, subgrouping of the patient, that is being done. Finance section we were talking about, there is, who are at a more risk of being a credit card defaulter. Based on our previous history, we are able to predict that. Then what is the spending segments, how is the spending pattern? Based on that, we are able to predict. Then obviously in law and governance also, there is lot of this case outcomes support is there. Then document clustering, huge amount of data that is present. From there we are able to uh, cluster and segregate, uh, maybe based on the type of cases or type of verdicts that was present, or the type of evidence that was present. All these are all applications of machine learning, case of law and governance. So that's a lot of areas. I think most of the areas have implementations of machine learning algorithms uh, in various disciplines that are present. Detailed comparison we had done a little bit. Real world examples. So if there is a known label, if we are starting a business question, so if it is known, obviously we will try and see, and we'll try to use the supervised predictions. If no, then unsupervised, we'll try some sort of clustering or annually. If a little bit of mixed is present, obviously we'll try to work on maybe the semi supervised or poor supervisions. Yeah, supervised key ideas I had spoken. So we train key ideas behind, is obviously to train, validate, and test, in order to keep the test set very honest. Um, yeah, I've spoken about the linear regressions, logistic, decision tree. Decision tree is another area where we explicitly, try to see, split the data, and we try to make groups, and from there we are able to get the output or make the decisions from there. Random forest is also, I mean, um, we try to build a lot of trees, and from there is the voting system or the average system, and from there uh, we try to predict that is the average or the majority vote across the various trees, and from there we are able to get the best model. K nearest also mainly very good when we have a similarity based reasoning, another non parametric method. SVM. Uh, so details of these methods I'm not mentioning. Maybe I just want to uh, yeah, highlight little bit the cases where we should remember. So if labels are present, then it is a sort of supervised. If numbers are present, then we have regression. If class is present, we have classification problem. No labels, then maybe we have to go for uh, the unsupervised method, that is clustering or PCA. Rare cases and maybe detections who are at risk. Mm. Little bit I want to touch down on the unsupervised learning method. So we when we are able to find the structure when the labels are unknown. So among this clustering, we usually cluster it based on some sort of similarity. So there has to be similarity among the records, and then only it is being broken down into segments. Or we are trying to reduce the dimensionality into many variables, or the few informative dimensions are kept, but the most important ones are kept. That is mainly when we are trying to see the in case of PCA. K means, yes, I will discuss. Hierarchical clustering, obviously, it's merges. DB scan, again, it's based on, it works well when we have irregular shaped clusters. So we group it that are more close to each other. That's more of the density based. PCA I told mainly for the dimension inequality. So a lot of examples are there. I'll just yeah, customer segmentation. So if we are able to want to segment our data, maybe based on how they are spending or what sort of product history or support history is there, then based on this sort of clusters we will be able to segment. Obviously there are certain common pitfalls, and sorry, and how we can avoid them. So when there is unclear data label, then maybe we have to make a more rigid sort of definition. When there is data leakage, then there can be problem with class imbalance, overfitting, underfitting. So all this has to be taken care. Little bit in details I want to mention about the clustering. um, so this is a set of technique when we are partitioning the data into the groups or so called clusters. So cluster is considered as a group of data object when we have similarity to the other object in the same cluster and dissimilar to the data object in the other cluster. So obviously it will help us to um, identify which are the meaningful and which are the useful ones. Applications of this is in very much in the real world scenario. So we have lot of excuse me, lot of applications for customer segmentation. Then we have document clustering, then recommendation engines. All these are very much the real world scenarios in which the clusterings are performed. So here also, I mean, based on the result, I mean, based on the you know how many were present, for how long the presenters sorry, the audience was present, we are able to segment our audience also into how many were quite attentive, how many had interest in particular topics. So we will be able to segment those people. So clustering also very much used for recommendation engines that I had already mentioned earlier. Netflix, Hotstar, and the other uh, apps that we are using, heavily using the machine learning algorithms, the clustering one. So marketing, biology, library, very very useful, clustering the different books on the basis of the topics or the information that is present. Insurance, when we acknowledge the customer, their policy, then we identify the frauds. Then city planning, obviously, group of houses, we want to study their geographical location, the other factors. Earthquake affected areas, when we want to identify the dangerous zone. uh, Marketing. So these are very much the applications of the clustering techniques. Three main features, more popular based on the features. The three main categories of this clustering, we I told you: partition clustering, hierarchical clustering, and density based. Partitioning means when we are dividing the data points into non-overlapping groups. Okay, so it works best when the clusters have a more spherical shape and scalable with respect to the algorithm complexity. Obviously, limitation is that it will well with the complex cluster shape. It's not possible having different shapes, and does not work with the clusters of different densities. But for hierarchical clustering, there is two types, that is agglomerative clustering and decisive clustering. So top down and bottom up. I think the diagram somehow is missing. So that's a tree based hierarchy model. So number of clusters will be created determined by the user. So um, advantage here, obviously, it is that we are able to find the fine relationship between the data objects, that is on a more finer level. And if you see the I mean, I don't know, somehow the figure is missing. So it's easily interpretable from the figure itself. It's very easy to interpret. But obviously the disadvantage or limitations of this, that it is more computationally expensive, obviously, and um, it's not very suitable for a large data set. Density based obviously will work better for non-spherical data, not suitable for high dimensional spaces. So I want to mention here the algorithm or the steps behind the k-means clustering, a very popular sort of clustering method that is used for unsupervised learning. So mainly we can break it down into the 5 steps. That is, first, the number of clusters is chosen. So we decide how many clusters we want to uh, divide. So that is denoted by k. If you want to group the students, maybe based on the three behaviors, so categories, that is those who are regular, those who are moderate, those who are irregular. So here k is 3. Now what we will do, second step, is we initialize the centroids. We randomly we select the k data points, and then we initialize the centroids. Centroids is basically mean. So if the data has two features, maybe we have height and weight. So centroids will be the random points that is present. Then we assign each data point to the nearest centroid, and then we calculate the distance. So here it can be Euclidean distance. Mainly here it is being used. Assign the point then to the cluster with the closest centroid. Then we will do what we will do. We will assign all the points and then again recompute the centroid. So means of all the points in that cluster, and this step keeps on repeating steps 3 and 4 until it has reached the point where there is no change. I mean the centroid doesn't change or there is very little change. So the maximum number of iteration is reached. So this is mainly the algorithm behind the k-means clustering. So here, if you see the example, we have clusters that are made k equal to 5. So we here, so there are other methods also which we use to find the number of k. Elbow method and other methods are present to determine silhouette methods, or we can randomly also choose the number of clusters we want to assign. Then each data point here we'll find out the center that is closest to, so that here from the data you can see that owns the set of the data points, and then each of these centers it will find the centroids of the points, and this will keep on changing until the centroid doesn't move at all. So this will be terminated. Okay. So here we can see that we are able to classify the clusters into the data into the 5 clusters using this sort of k-means clustering. So this is a very common method of clustering that is used. So I want to show the code. Okay, so the screen is visible.
Yes.
Yes. So I think previously, so this is in Google Colab. So I think Sir has already shown how to use the Colab or Jupyter Notebook, where whatever is being used. Um, I'll just show the. So here we are trying to use implement implement K-means clustering for a breast cancer data. Okay, so um, obviously we have imported the NumPy. I think this portion have been covered, so we know. So NumPy we know that's the numerical computation. That's for arrays and matrix. Then we have the pandas, matplotlib obviously for the visualization. Then we have imported the sorry, um, yes. So the data set that is already present. So we have loaded the breast cancer data set. Then we have the standard scalar that's mainly used for normalization. And then k-means obviously we have used that for clustering. Okay, so we are first loading the data set. So loading of the data set is taking place. Then once the when we have loaded the real data set, then we are creating the data frame. Uh, then here we are actually trying to here what we are trying to do is based on two features we are trying to uh, uh, categorize it into cancer and non-cancer, malignant and non-malignant. Okay, so 0 for cancer and 1 for non-cancer. Then we have set it as malignant and benign. I think those who are um, not aware, malignant means uh, when the tumor is cancerous, and benign means I mean not all tumors are malignant, some can be benign also. Benign means it is non-cancerous. Okay, so first here what we are doing, if you visualize, then we are taking two measurements only. I mean, if we see the total, there are a lot of other measurements that are present. Here we are taking only into consideration the two measurements, that is mean radius and mean area. Just for the simplicity, we just want to see, and the first five patients we just see. Then we standardize the data. Okay. Um, then after both the features, obviously that will prevent, I mean, dominatingly it will uh, so now once the standardization has been done, then we will try to, is there any problem? I'm not able to.
Sorry, just wanted to ask a simple question. What standardization are you using here?
Sorry.
Sorry, I was asking you, what standardization protocol are you using here? There can be many different ones. You can use mean max, mean, etc. Have you identified the form of standardization here?
No, it's just making it. I think what was done. I
Because there are many approaches. Obviously, you
Yeah,
need to
yeah, yeah,
standardize the
sure,
data.
sure. Um,
That's fine. Carry on. Carry on.
yeah,
No, no
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Carry on.
I'll just get back to you. Yeah,
That's fine. No problem.
yeah, yeah, sure. So, yeah, just to standardize both the features, and then from there we just follow the k-means clustering, um, and then predict the class. So, and then the visualization, I think. just check on it. And then for a new patient, we will be able to likely predict. Yeah, the two clusters that are present. There is some problem. Yeah. So we are just able to, based on the, I think we have taken the radius and the area. So the based on the median tumor level, we are able to categorize it into a cancer and a healthy person. So interpretation here will be obviously the cluster 0 that has the smaller tumor, so that's likely to be healthy, and cluster 1 that's the larger tumor that's likely to be cancerous. Uh, yes. And based on the predicting of the new patient, we are able to find out based on the radius and area. So here actually we are not predicting, we are just classifying because it's a unsupervised problem. So we are just trying to classify it based on the radius and area, how the patients that are on a low risk and medium risk and medium risk. There are obviously problems and flaws to this problem, but this is just a big example. I mean, an example of how uh, a classification can be done. I think most of the people will have their own sort of data, and we, based on the data, we can easily uh, work on to see uh, what data set and what model will fit best. So this is more or less the area I wanted to share. So, okay, thank you. Okay, so if there is any queries or any discussion, I think a lot of people might have their sort of relevant area in which they're working. So maybe we can discuss a little bit about that. So with that, I end the talk for today. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. If you allow, I just have a small query.
Yes.
You were talking about one module or function that is to be used for normalization. I'm just wondering how normalization will be helpful in this case, or how is it used?
Many of this method requires the data to be yeah, I think many of this data they require the method fields they required it to be normalized. So here mainly, as far as I remember, I mean I've done this work back.
Oh,
Uh,
you mean the normalization on the data before feeding into the model?
yes, yes, yes. Like
Okay, I
just
got it.
just like I mean just transforming the thing, just
So that all the data,
raw
all the raw
data.
data
Yeah.
remain on the same footing.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I got it. Yes.
Yeah. So x minus mu, I mean just the z score, transforming each of those features. So the mean
Right.
becomes 0 and yeah, standard deviation is 1. Just that. So that
Okay.
it's in the same scale. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I would be curious. I mean, what sort of the other field, I mean, people are working on, or the other implementation, or yeah, what things people are, if we could have, anyone would like to share. That would be beneficial for us for further.
Can I share some inputs here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely.
Okay, right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation.
Thank
There are quite a few things, obviously. I mean, one of the first things that you may want to consider or even justify is K-means has its own restrictions, as an example.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
its main restriction is you need to know the centroid. So if you don't know the
Yes.
centroid, or if it's completely genuinely unsupervised data, which means you have
Yes.
got very little knowledge of the data,
Hmm.
then K-means is not a very good suggested
Yes.
method. It should be replaced with something like a hierarchical structure, maybe dendrograms or
Yes.
some such thing. But in terms of application, I think this has wide-ranging applications. Say you have talked about breast cancer data. Now,
Yes.
instead of breast cancer, if you have a different kind of cancer, you can still apply that. You,
Yeah, I think that would have been yeah, a better example. Just yeah, rightly
yes, you can
mentioned.
do that. But one of the things that I will definitely recommend, and that's something, at least that's what I do all the time. It's pretty much a challenge. Just imagine that breast cancer, I'm taking the same example that you have. So breast cancer, the data has, let us say, 35 different variables. Now, that's by that I mean
Sorry. Sorry.
35
Sorry. Yeah.
different, it's okay, 35 different biophysical or biochemical pathways affecting the
Yes.
process. So it's like a vector. So the vector is defined by 35 different scalars. Now, when you want to k-means or practically anything, even in a hierarchical assaying, the problem with that approach is how do you know which are the 2 or 3 most important ones? So that probably is a step that should precede the application of clustering. You just basically want to rank using an independent protocol, something like a random forest, SVM, or anything. Again, the choice is very subjective, and it has to be, I recommend, well, as I was speaking with you, literally I'm writing a paper on a completely different topic with the applications of all these different things, but applied to understanding supply chain data coming from the
Yeah.
different companies. Okay, so they're affected by many different factors.
Hmm.
You don't know which are the most important factors. That's one challenge. The second challenge is some of these factors are interdependent. So basically, like a functional.
Yeah.
That makes it like a many to one mapping. It makes the centroid hidden. That's another big problem. So all these things have to be independently sorted first to get a ranking of the variables concerned, I think.
Of the variables.
Secondly, also to identify how many of these variables are dependent on each other. As kind of, again, I mean, if you think
Yeah.
of a y group of variables and another x group of variables. So x is the independent variables, y is the dependent variables. Now y1 may be dependent on x1 and x2, whereas y2 may be dependent on X3 to X5 or X10. So it's a complicated many to one mapping structure. And the problem there becomes multi-dimensional. And again, you have to dimensionally reduce your vector space
Yeah.
to identify which side you
The
want
most,
to go.
yeah.
It's a very complicated mechanism, and I think personally it's very, very subjective. And the only way to get around, I think this is something that I will try to address during my presentation. The fact of something called a bootstrapping method. I won't go into that now, but the problem with that otherwise is, you like method 1, I like method 2. Now, how do I prove that your method is better than mine or mine is better than yours? And this is a big problem traditionally in the field of machine deep learning. The conclusions have been very method dependent and hence unreliable. So if you take all your conclusions to a doctor using your set of bag of tricks, and I use my bag of tricks on the same set of data coming with very different conclusions because my method is different, what would the oncologist do with that information? Should the oncologist believe you, me, or nobody? That's the challenge.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to demeaning in any sense. I'm just talking about the challenge.
No, that's very rightly said. I mean, and also, the cancer itself, the heterogeneity of the data itself also poses another challenge itself. So
absolutely. I mean, I won't be presenting my works on cancer. Probably I won't. But just to give another hint here is about, see, the problem again with all forms of data modeling is the fact that you can do any sort of a data model, but see, your machine learning or deep learning method doesn't distinguish between the form of the data. So the data may be coming from breast cancer study, it may be coming from an accretion hole, a black hole body. It doesn't discriminate. It will just go through its same set of eigenvalues, get its same set of conclusions, and the only way to get around is something that very few people have started doing. We are doing that. Something called process modeling. So connecting the biochemical and the biophysical pathways with the data. And then validate data against the biochemical pathways just to make sure that the data is actually being generated by the process of the system that you want to study.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's some sort of areas that I had been working on. So
excellent.
Obviously we had to. There's more complexity to it than. Yeah,
it is. Sorry again, thanks.
Fascinating and challenging. Yeah.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So what sort of area, what sort of area are you working on?
Quite a few different ones. So I work in...
we will be listening to your talk maybe. Yeah,
some of them, but certainly I won't have the time to go into all of that. So I work
obviously.
I work in different forms of healthcare. Cancer is one of them. It's mostly to do with cancer therapy, actually, or something related to nanoparticle-based drug delivery and identifying the best protocol to do that. So that's one area. Cardiovascular health is another area. Immunology, more specifically T and B cell immunology, it's called immunological synapse. That's another area. There are others.
So nanobased delivery, is it more on the lab-based work or it's more computationally?
Computational, because I'm not an experimentalist, but of course they work together with experimentalists.
Okay.
So yes, I mean, it is very interesting, and it's not just related to cancer. The problem is very simple for everybody to understand. The problem relates to the fact that when you think about something called array therapy, which is typically complement to chemotherapy, and it doesn't have to be cancer, it can be any form of tumor. Now the problem is the ray being a heavy radiation with doesn't just destroy the malignant cells, it also kills a lot of benign cells.
Yes.
And that is big problem because often a patient dies or otherwise gets incapacitated
Yeah,
just
that's
because
where
of the impact.
precision medicine comes into picture.
Yes,
But
yes. So
targeted
there
therapy.
are multiple ways that people are trying to solve this problem, and I'm
Yes.
personally connected to two completely different schools of thought
Mhm.
in trying to address this particular problem. The one that I'm working closer with is the one related to nanoparticle-based drug delivery.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
the objective
Previously,
would be something like it will gravitate in a way the medicine only at the location and nowhere else. But of
yes.
course, this is just talking about the healthcare. I work in completely different sectors in economics, for example, in supply chain, in liquid crystals, completely different areas, but they're rich. I mean, they're very enticing in their own ways.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, very nice talking to you.
Any
Good to you.
questions? Any questions from the audience, please? If there is no other question, then let's thanks to the speaker once again. Very nice, very interactive lectures by the youngest speaker of this workshop, Riti Roy. Thank you very much. So we close right here. Okay,
Okay, thank you very much,
okay.
sir.
Uh,
The session has been very nice. I mean, all the sessions still, and we really hope the other sessions
yeah.
will be uh, equally good
Uh,
and inspiring for all of us. So, yeah,
hmm.
with that, I
Oh,
think we can end today's.
yeah. So, okay, good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
We will meet again day after tomorrow.
Yes, we'll meet again on Thursday.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.